Yo guys, what's going on? It's Max, and today's video is going over the reportedly leaked changes that will be coming for the Skull Merchant for the live release from the PTB. Full disclosure, Scott Jun made a video on this, is going to go more in depth than I will be going over these concepts, and he also talked about it from his initial impression of Skull Merchant. Please go watch that video. I think that sums up everything very nicely. However, I just want to give my 2 cents on what I think about it and kind of how I ultimately see the Skull Merchant will be for the live launch. In short, and I think Scott says this very clearly, a lot of people kind of feel that sentiment. I even Spooky Loops in his video talks about it too, where the core issue of the Skull Merchant is that zoning is not a fun thing to go against. In particular, zoning is just meaning you are denying the opportunity to play on a tile set, to loop around that for a little bit, and you're basically just pushing people away. It's not fun to play, it's not fun to go against, and ultimately your power, and Spooky Loops, power, as he put it, is basically just to deny someone the potential to use a portion of the map, which there's not really much component and like counterplay to that idea, to that concept. And a lot of the reason why I think the Skull Merchant is going to feel like another meh, arguably flop of a character, and that, in my opinion, is strictly just because the whole playstyle of holding W away from where you try to set up your drones is still going to be the best solution in terms of counterplay, and that's just not fun to go against. It's the same exact thing as the Knight, so oh well, like, we can't do a whole lot about it. But if we were to take that away, just straight up, I think these are all beneficial changes. I think one is actually a nerf, which was really weird. It's the second to last one, but I'll run down my thoughts on all of them really quickly. But I do want to preface all of this with all of these changes are buffs. Most of them are quality of life, probably don't happen in any of your games, maybe a couple here and there. So I'm not going to complain that they're buffs, because I think she is pretty weak and does need some buffs in terms of making her more viable. But the core issue of holding W being the strongest thing to do, denying loops being an unfun thing to play as, to play against, and ultimately denying a lot of the value that she gets as a character, it's just a fundamental issue that exists with the Skull Merchant now and the Knight in the past from like these zoning type characters. That being said, quick changes, I'll just run through them because most of them are buffs that I am happily willing to agree with. I have no issue with them, but Scott's video, like I said, is going to basically regurgitate the same things I've said, and his longer video where it was a community feedback, how can we collectively fix the Skull Merchant, were all really cool changes, and I highly recommend you watch that video. I'll link it in the description so you don't have to go digging for it. But anyways, so the Skull Merchant, energy cooldown reduced to 10 seconds. That's basically just 2.5 seconds faster. You'll get your drones back. Cool, I'm happy with that. I didn't really have an issue with the cooldowns of drones in the first place, but a buff's a buff. Time for a drone to become active after spawning decreased to 3 from 4 seconds. 1 second's not going to make much of a difference, but it's a buff. It'll become active. It'll start ticking away and making them exposed. Your undetectable comes up a second faster. It's all good. Exposure lock duration increased to 60 from 30. So 60 seconds of exposed is kind of scary, like, full disclosure. Scott says it good though. You shouldn't be getting exposed against the Skull Merchant. You could, like I said, probably the best way to play against her is to walk away. And in this case, you should not be getting exposed against her. If you are in a situation where you do need to get exposed, you could probably disable the drone anyways. So that's not really a big issue, but it's a buff. If someone does happen to get exposed, you have a lot more leniency in that chase to secure a one shot, which is awesome. Decline lock delay increased to 10 seconds. So to my understanding, this is just once they are initially exposed, there is a duration of time they cannot lose their exposure / lock-on status. Not 100% on the meaning, just full disclosure, but same thing, just a buff, more flexibility, more window of time for you to be able to secure that down. Lock-on no longer depletes while in range of an active drone. So if you're hovering around the area where a drone is being deployed, and you are exposed, you will not be losing. Your timer is basically paused while you're in that drone range, which once again you probably aren't sticking around in a drone very often. Or I shouldn't say very often. You shouldn't be in a drone range for that long of a time. If you get exposed from a drone, more often than not, you probably made a mistake. And the fact that this is just basically a buff to help against people who are playing it wrong, probably won't have much value or meaning to it. Lock-on activates immediately if the survivor fails to hack a drone. Cool. I mean, unless you are, if you're mid-chase, you're not hacking a drone. If you're far enough away from it, you got time to press the buttons in order. Sure, someone's gonna make a mistake, but I mean, yeah, it's another buff. Sure, like I'll take it. It's nice. It'll help with the lock-on thing more and more, but the tangible effects of that are probably negligible. Undetectable delay reduced to 2 seconds was 3. Same kind of thing that I talked about before. In my video with the gameplay, you'll see I ran Trail of Torment and a couple other spicy, like Tinkerer, a lot of perks that made me undetectable, which is weird because now, even Scott says this is kind of like a nerf too, because you'll have a terror radius that starts increasing and then a sudden drop off of a terror radius where you just know the killer is probably nearby you. His change, which in my opinion is just so much better, is make the survivor oblivious. So this way they don't hear you coming up. You don't have to worry about trying to finesse this whole undetectable mechanic to hide and run up towards them. If you make the survivors inside of it oblivious, and even, you know, let's just even go into the lore accurate thing, just make it like a white noise that goes on, and it's extremely like distracting. You can't pay attention to what's going on. So there's like a lore reason for you to not be in full focus in a drone range, because even then I think in the trailer there was like a really bright light that was like kind of like a flashbang thing that disoriented them. So I think the oblivious solution is much more elegant, allows you to really capitalize on the whole stealth component. But a buff's a buff, you know, I get undetectable faster, but at the same time, it's 1 more second that the survivors have to be aware of the terror radius is gone, killer's probably nearby, I'm gonna start running. So, ups and downs, but I think it's a decent change. I don't know. The whole undetectable thing is very niche in its application. I really tried to commit to it, and that was the only reason it really worked. Claw Trap battery life up to 45 seconds from 25. That's just an objective buff. It's really good. Now, Scott talks about the Brown add-on where fast vaulting, when you have a Claw Trap on you, breaks the pallet and loses a Claw Trap. Converting a Claw Trap into a broken pallet is really good. Admittedly, when I played it like 5-6 games, I never got any value out of it. Probably just because I was learning the Skull Merchant and messing up a lot, but a lot of people tend to be in agreement that that's a pretty strong add-on. In my experience, it hadn't been, but I also was playing pretty poorly. So if that's the case, I think that Brown add-on becomes much more viable, especially with an extra 20 seconds of, if you choose to fast vault a pallet, you will break it. And that basically can, if they choose to fast vault a pallet and it insta breaks, that can I would confidently say it secures an injure state on the person that vaulted. Whether it's healthy to injured, injured to down, when you fast vault a pallet and it insta breaks, the distance that you could have gotten is diminished significantly since you don't have to break the pallet. So that's a good change. Also helps you track a little bit more. Unreachable drone duration increased to 10 seconds from 5 seconds. I think that's another good change. Inherently a little bit more game delay. You can't really stay inside of the drone radius because it will lock onto you and you can't just walk up and disable it the moment it comes down. Time for a drone in active mode to switch to reconnaissance mode decreased to 20 seconds from 25. So that one I think is actually a nerf, because you want the drones to be in active mode as often as possible, and it's not like they get a benefit from being in standby mode. So this one is a nerf, I assume, to accommodate for all the other changes, but I don't think it was inherently needed. Maybe they're seeing something that I don't, and if you guys see that, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to figure out why. Maybe I'm missing something. And probably the biggest buff, one of the things that I talked about that I'm really happy to actually see being changed right here, is the movement speed modifier when you're looking at your radar increased to 95%, and it was 87. So like I said, when you're looking at that radar, it felt like you slowed down a lot, and happily they're fixing it. You can't M1 when you're looking at the radar, so because of that, I don't know why I need to be slowed, especially, like, you know, I'm not using this really in chase or anything. I could, but it's like, if I want to use the radar for information, I'd like to just see where they're at and walk towards them. And maybe, in my opinion, a different solution that could make her more beneficial to kind of capitalize on that information is if you are in chase, you don't get a movement speed change at all. But if you are not in chase and you're looking at your radar, you get increased movement speed if you are in a like visual cone, kind of like spine chill, where it's like kind of in a direction where you're looking at, if you're looking at someone who's been tracked with a claw trap. This way you don't just, hold the radar up and you just get to walk around way faster than other people, but at least you're walking towards a piece of information you can capitalize on. That's my quick take on these changes. I know it wasn't super quick, but the biggest core issue is that the core fundamental gameplay loop of the Skull Merchant is to walk away from her power. So a lot of these changes just don't feel like they're going to make too much a difference. And it's the same kind of issue that people have with the Knight. It seems like it's going to be with the Skull Merchant. I'm happy to see that they seem to agree that she's on the weaker side and needs buffs. A lot of these are just objective buffs that I think will help her, but the niche application of them makes me think they won't change too much. And the core fundamental problem of the Skull Merchant, in my opinion, is really what's holding her back from succeeding. And unfortunately, it's a little bit frustrating because it's like I want the game to succeed. Like a lot of content creators, I don't bash on the game. I don't want to be negative and say this game is awful, even though I joke about it time to time, like in clips. I want the game to succeed. I want them to do really well. And I think bringing more awareness to what people are finding frustrating from the player base is a good first step to eventually getting to that point. That's about it from my end. Once again, if you guys do want to come check me out live on Twitch, I am 12 to 2 o'clock Central. I usually stream just a couple hours, usually extend a little bit more than that. Additionally, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe if you have been enjoying the conversations. It would really let me know that you guys are enjoying the content, and I can work on that a little bit more and more. And let me know in the comments what you think about these changes. Do you like them? Do you not like them? Do you think I am wrong in some of my components? I'd be happy to have those conversations. But that's about it. Take care, everybody, and peace.